So you followed the last video, you got PI and Claude Code totally set up in your sandbox virtual environment, and now you want to build something with it. But then you're also like, how do I get files into here if it's running in a virtual machine? Well, some folks might know how to do that. You can use SCP or rsync, or maybe you're using a virtual machine platform that allows you to copy files back and forth, which may or may not have some risks depending on how much you want to sandbox this. So let's assume that you don't know how to get files in, or you just want a different way to get files in. Or another purpose of this is to show you how to build another tool using your PAI and Claude Code. By the end of this, you should have a nice little service running where you can drag and drop files to your assistant and get those PDFs or documents or anything that you want to have the assistant work on loaded into the assistant system so it can actually work on it. Okay, so here we are at the command line again. We haven't started PI yet. We'll start that in a minute. And this assumes that you've already set up the VM, just like we did in the previous video, and that you've got Claude Code and PAI installed and the fixes there so that you can just start PAI again in a new session. So I'm just going to run the PAI command. Here's the prompt. I'm just going to put it in here, and you can just type along with this or find it on my site. Build a simple file upload server. I want to have a nice drag and drop web interface that I access from my browser. Save uploaded files to, this is my user folder on the Linux machine. That's what that means. And a subfolder there called uploads. It'll make that folder if it doesn't exist. Limit file uploads to 100 megabytes. This is arbitrary. You could change this to something higher or remove it altogether, and then show upload progress. We're telling it to use bun, which is just a nice, easy way to run JavaScript program and keep it simple. So hopefully it doesn't over-engineer this and make something really complex. Let's see what happens. So it's going to use PAI's multi-step process to break down a request and make sure that it understands it, come up with a process to get it done, probably set up a to-do list for itself, and then get to work. As you can see, this stuff isn't super fast. I imagine it's going to get faster over time, but to give it some credit, it's doing a lot in the background. So here we go. That's us saying it understands what we asked for, what we didn't ask for. Right, so it made a plan, and now it's going to start building. So it started writing code. Made a .ts file, which is where its JavaScript or its TypeScript code will be. Then it's going to use bun to run it. There it is, finding its IP address, since it knows you can't use localhost directly since you're not on the same machine as it. That's from the instructions we set up when we installed it. And here we go. It gives you both versions of the URL. The first one won't work. The second one will. Look at that. And we should be able to just drag and drop files into it. Now, for a simple example, you could use this for anything. I'm just going to pretend like I had 4 meetings and we have a bunch of transcripts from those meetings. Either somebody took notes or we recorded them and transcribed them, or who knows what. Maybe it's just a few different notes jotted down in some text files. This could be really anything, like I said. So I'll put the first one in. Okay, look at that. Got the upload. Let's ask it, do you see a file in the uploads folder? Looks like it got a file. So now I'm just going to drag the 3 other files in there. There we go. These are just example files that another agent generated. Unimportant what they actually are. And I'll give you another fun example of something that I have set up, and maybe I'll make another video of how I have this set up, but I have it set up so I can just talk to it. This is independent of Claude Code or PAI. This is just another tool I'm running on my system to be able to dictate so I don't have to type everything. So there should be 4 files now uploaded to you in that uploads folder. If you could, and then I'm going to give it a prompt. I did not stop my dictation before it said that. Doesn't really matter. It usually figures itself out. So I'm just going to put another prompt in here. I put this on the web page as well, so you can copy and paste it, or you can just type something similar in here. Or any experiment you want to do with it's fine too. Say, analyze all meeting notes in the uploads folder. Create a consolidated action item list with owners and statuses, all decisions made and when, current blockers and their resolution status, a timeline of how the project evolved. So I think what's important to take away here is not that we're processing meeting notes. It's that we had a nice, easy way to get files into an AI agent now. So that way this server isn't just totally isolated. You can get files in there to do things that you need to in an easy way. Okay, so here we are. If we were truly asking it to do this task for us, it did. It gave us a outline. It told us what all the blockers were of this imaginary meeting scenario. Give us a project timeline and evolution. And now what I might ask it to do, again, just to give you some examples of how we can continue to use these tools in really interesting ways, can you now build for me a web page view of this that's really nice and pretty and helps clearly communicate all of this information to me just in a web browser. Use a nice dark theme. Okay, so we'll see what it does. But in the meantime, let's talk about what we want to do to make sure we always have access to this nice, neat little web upload service that we built. So right now it's just running a one-off little web server to make sure that you can access the files just in this one session. That's not super helpful to have to ask it to run every single time. What we'll want to do once it finishes this other side example we're doing of just it processing this information into a web page for us, we will also ask it to build a service so that it can run long-term in the background on this server. And it's great because, again, this isn't on your computer. This is a server that's just running in the background on this little Linux server that we set up. I find it funny looking at some of the things PAI helps it process when it's doing its observe step. What we asked: web page view of meeting analysis, dark theme, pretty clear communication. What's implied: interactive, easy to scan, professional look. What you don't want: plain text dump, ugly default styling, hard to navigate. Cool. So then it's working through its tools to see if it should use any of those. It considers using its engineer agent. But then it figures, hey, it's not actually that complex. We're just looking for a single HTML file. We're not going to engage a whole engineer. But it will. If you asked it to do something much more complex, it'll engage all these other personas and tools and agents to help build things. It's really neat. So now it's actually doing the building step. See, it built a plan and how it was going to build it. We had the upload server was already running on port 3000, so it's going to start it up in 3001 so they don't conflict. You're going to have two web servers running in a minute. This is just a pattern that I use for things. You don't have to use this web server pattern. Some people work entirely in text files or Markdown or just exchange files back and forth with it only. You could set up a SMB server or use something like Tailscale to send files to it. You don't have to do any of this pattern. I like this pattern because it's just an easy way for a machine to communicate with me. And I like how web pages look, and I like that I have a web browser on my computer and I can just open anything with it. You can have it build you full applications, Mac apps, Windows apps, whatever you need. This is just one way to create a nice visual communication system. And as you might imagine, lots of other pieces to this. You could build out a whole nice web dashboard that's always running on your assistant server to help you communicate with it. It doesn't have to just be a single web page. Okay, so here we go. We got port 3001. We're going to open that up. We got a nice little dashboard, key decisions, we got blockers, project timeline. You could probably imagine more stuff you could do with this now that you've got it in this format. You probably could imagine giving it a database where you store all your meeting notes. You probably could imagine giving it more things to help you filter or more ways to help you plan. You could actually connect this system to your calendar or your contacts and have it connect certain dots. Now, that's also important to start thinking about the safety of doing that, right? So you got to make sure there's nothing sensitive in your calendar, or it's not going to mess you up terribly if it makes terrible changes to your calendar. So if you want to experiment with a remote calendar, like a Google Calendar or something that you would give it access to, you'd probably want to set up a standalone one while you experiment so it doesn't mess up any of your other activities. But you also need to consider, is this meeting information sensitive? Should I be putting this in there if it gets processed and sent up to Claude's cloud? These are all things that you need to consider when doing these experiments. Our sandbox doesn't prevent that stuff from getting leaked or shared. It just helps confine what it has access to. So using example data like this and non-sensitive systems are just a really good way for you to kind of explore what it might be doing and think of some of the ramifications of using it in this way. Okay, so that was just a side example while we were here. Let's go back to the main situation where we want to make sure our upload form is always available. Okay, we don't need that dashboard view anymore that we just set up, so you can go ahead and shut that down. What we would like to have is the upload service long running. So maybe you could pick a port where it could run long term. You could set it up as a service on this server so it always runs in the background, and that if it shuts down, it restarts, and that you could probably document somewhere how this is built out so that we have a way to refer back to it in the future, and that you know how to work on it if I ask you about it, or if it crashes and you need to check the logs or something like that. See, I'm just talking to it in natural language. There's probably a much more effective way to talk to this, but this is working really well for me right now. There's a lot been said in the past few years about prompt engineering, and it's worth noting that that stuff still applies. the more effectively you write here, the more effectively you can structure what you're trying to tell it and ask it to do, the better. But that's one of the strengths of running something like Pi on top of Claude Code is it's sort of helping you do that. Not only is there a massive infrastructure on the back end that we'll have to break down in a different video of how it has a bunch of built-in prompts and kind of in the form of skills and other tools, it's also in this 7-step process giving you a way to structure the information that I just kind of dumped on it in my voice in a way that it can actually process it and help achieve the goal more effectively. Sort of like a prompt engineering engineer, or it's a prompt engineer. Great. So this right now I can tell you just it's following a common pattern on Linux systems. And on Ubuntu, we're using something called systemd to set up a process for you in the background. It's using bun to do that process long term. It's choosing a different port, like I threw at it. It decided to do it as a user service so that we don't need sudo. Cool, it figured that out on its own. This is what keeps it running after logout. Great, so these are start and stop commands you could use. Upload service is now permanent on this port, Chris. I'll auto restart if it crashes and survive logouts. Full docs are in uploads readme. That's funny. It's a funny place that it chose to put it, but hey, we didn't give any better instructions for, I was keeping it simple for these purposes, but long term, you might want to have another folder where you keep things like this and you have it help you document itself. There's some awesome memory systems built into PAI, but I tend to use those as a fallback to my own systems that I help to have it store information for me long term, just so I know where things are. We keep simpler versions of things in addition to its memory. So our upload service is running there. In theory, this will stay running. So when we're done with this session, as long as your virtual machine is on, this service should just be running and then you can always use it. And if not, guess what? Just talk to PAI, Claude Code, about the issues you're having with it or if it's not running. And, if you have to, point it at that path where we kept the README file. Maybe it'll help you resolve any issues you have with it. But if all goes well, this will just be here now when you need it to upload files to it. You can use it in the next session. Like if I end this session, all right, let's just start a new session. Right, it didn't close down the service like it would have if we would have left it in its temporary state. Do you have access to the uploads folder? To be fair, we actually didn't give it a lot of context or really any long-term context to remember where its upload folder is. That's something we may want to do. But for these purposes, let's just see if it can figure it out. And if not, we'll tell it where it is. Great, look at that. It found its upload folder. All right, dragging a quick test file in here. All right, look at that. It uploaded. Great. I'm just going to say, how about now? What's in the folder? Great. So there we go. So it's still working. Now that it's a service and running in the background, it can still work as it did in our example. So really simple example. We're not doing anything super complex here. We're not building any really fancy applications, but it gave you a way to connect with both giving files to it and also just to kind of see what types of patterns you could use to work with it. You're probably going to come up with a bunch of patterns on your own the more you work with it, and that's great. So stay tuned, and we'll do more workflows like this, and I'll give you some more examples of what I'm actually using PAI for.